Hey, what's up you guys? This is Steffi, aka In My Humble Opinion, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving my non-spoilery review on Hulu's upcoming original series entitled Pam and Tommy. So Pam and Tommy stars Lily James, Sebastian Stan, Seth Rogen, Nick Offerman, and Taylor Schilling. The first 3 episodes were directed by Craig Gillespie, who directed I, Tonya, and the rest were actually directed by females, which is pretty cool. They include Hannah Fidel, Lake Bell, and Gwyneth Horder-Payton. The series was written by Robert Siegel, who wrote The Founder, and D.V. DeVincentis, who recently worked on American Crime Story Impeachment. And lastly, this series is based on the article Pam and Tommy, The Untold Story of the World's Most Infamous Sex Tape, written by Amanda Chicago Lewis. So in my opinion, I don't think you really need to know that much about this incident and who Tommy Lee and Pamela Anderson are. I think the show does a pretty good job with letting you know who these people are and like the events that led up to the actual release of the sex tape. But in case you just needed a quick 101, so Pamela Anderson was a super famous model and actress, probably best known for the TV show Baywatch that was super popular in the 90s. And Tommy Lee is the wild drummer of Motley Crue. They were really one of the most high-profile celebrity couples of the 90s. You know, even though I was technically alive during this time, I was only like maybe 1 or 2 years old, so I don't really remember much, but from what I can gauge, I'd love to know if you were around during this time. Let me know if this is an accurate description. But I feel like the aesthetic that Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee had together, they exist on the same mood board. They walked so that couples like Kim Kardashian and Pete Davidson, Megan Fox and Machine Gun Kelly, and Kourtney Kardashian and Travis Barker could run. They are kind of the blueprint of that aesthetic, in my opinion. Let me know if that's accurate in the comment section below. So yeah, essentially this show is about their whirlwind romance and their huge sex tape scandal that occurred in the mid-90s. The fact that this occurred in, 95, 96 plays a huge part in their story because this is when the internet starts to become a thing, and because of their sex tape scandal, it really helped revolutionize the porn industry. But yeah, that's pretty much all you need to know, and it's going to be explored and explained throughout the series as you watch. The first 3 episodes are going to be released on Hulu, at least here in the United States, February 2nd, and then in the subsequent weeks following that, a new episode will be released, and there is a total of 8 episodes. So now, like I do in all of my reviews, I'm going to be sharing things that I really liked about the show, and then things I didn't really like, and then at the very end, I'm going to be giving my overall rating and review. But of course, I have to give a huge thank you to Hulu for giving me early access to the show. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So here we go. Okay, so let's talk about some things that I really liked. So, of course, performances. Sebastian Stan, who plays Tommy Lee, he's pretty good. Seth Rogen, who plays this guy named Rand, he's the guy who was responsible for leaking the sex tape. But for me, the top performer of this series, hands down, is Lily James. I am a huge Lily James fan. I haven't seen her in everything, but I've seen a good chunk of her roles, and I feel like, she just really delivers. First of all, the transformation. Let's just say there's a reason why this is called Pam and Tommy and not Tommy and Pam, even though I'm pretty sure in the 90s they were called Pam and Tommy, but she gets first billing for a reason, okay? I think between her and Sebastian Stan's characters, Pamela Anderson has more of an apparent arc throughout the series. The way Pamela Anderson is depicted in the show, I feel like she's very sympathetic, but at the same time she has a backbone and really tries to uphold her own dignity even when she is backed into a corner and has to make certain decisions. I think in terms of Lily James as an actress, I feel like she has a lot of material to work with here. And, when I first found out that she was cast as Pamela Anderson, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Not saying that I didn't think she could do it, but I was like, wow, we've never really seen her in this kind of role before. Pamela Anderson, I don't really know much about her, but at least in the way that she's portrayed on the show, she seems to be a very sweet person. And Lily James tends to play these like very sweet girl next door kind of characters. So that made sense to me. But also in this show, she gets to show off her range. Like, she is angry, she's full of rage, and we really don't get to see that side of her too often on screen. So if you're a Lily James fan, I feel like you should really watch this show just based off of her performance and transformation alone. The second thing I really liked about this show, of course, are the themes that it tackles. A major theme is the misogyny that women in the entertainment industry deal with, but especially women who, because they dress a certain way or they made certain career choices like posing for Playboy, therefore they really shouldn't have a problem with being objectified, which obviously not true. Consent is another huge thing that's explored in the show as well. One of you said that one of your favorite actresses is Taylor Schilling. She has a really great scene in this show too, where she's completely going off on Rand because, you know, she tells him that the difference between doing porn and him leaking this sex tape is consent. A little backstory to Taylor Schilling's character: she plays the ex-wife of Rand, and she also works as a porn star. So it does make sense that she would understand the importance of consent. And meanwhile, he doesn't, because he's like literally a stupid man who has nice guy syndrome. And then the last thing that I really liked about this show as well is the 90s nostalgia. Of course, because it is the 90s, the music in the show is really, really great. Like, you have music from The Cardigans, Third Eye Blind, Alanis Morissette. Tower Records also features prominently throughout the show, which, don't you guys miss Tower Records? Fun fact, back in 2019, when I went to Tokyo for the first time, I went to this like 5-6 story Tower Records, and it was like one of the greatest days of my life. Anyways, yes, Tower Records features prominently in this show, but I will be going back to this Tower Records point because there is a bit of a goof that I noticed while watching the show. The fashion is really great as well. There are some very cute outfits that Pamela Anderson wears. And like I said, the early days of the internet, there's a lot of comedic moments that kind of circle around people trying to figure out how to quote unquote use the web. Okay, so now let's talk about some things that I didn't really like about the show. So first, for me, I feel like some of the writing is a bit on the nose. With a lot of shows recently, there's been this trend of let's take a popular event and then reanalyze the way in which we as a culture consumed, participated in said event, and also just really treated all of those people involved poorly. So I'm thinking of like American Crime Story, The People versus O.J. Simpson, and how the media treated Marsha Clark. Recently, American Crime Story, Impeachment, how the media treated Monica Lewinsky. Pamela Anderson is kind of getting that same treatment in this. So with that being said, it's like we know why this story is important and where you're trying to take us, but that doesn't mean that some of your characters should straight up have like monologues where they're literally listing the themes of your show. Second thing I didn't really like about the show as well is in the second half, it really feels like you're watching two different shows. So after the sex tape is leaked, Pam and Tommy, they really start going through it. So when you're watching them, it feels more dramatic and tense. And I was more interested in that aspect of the story. But then with Rand, Seth Rogen's character, he spends a good chunk of the second half on the run, running away from people who are after him for a multitude of reasons. It feels more like heisty, comedic in that sense. So I don't know, sometimes I felt like there was a bit of like tonal whiplash between those two storylines, and I didn't really care for Rand as much as a character. That may also be because I just think Rand is kind of a piece of shit, but at the same time I get that some people could be interested in Rand's part in the story, but I don't know. Okay, the third thing that is a bit questionable with this series is how they romanticize Pam and Tommy's relationship. So the way Tommy Lee is portrayed in the show, he seems to be a very attentive, caring, tender husband. But at the very end, they show title cards that explain that in February of 1998, Pam filed for divorce, and then 2 months earlier, so around like December of 1997, Lee was arrested for a physical fight in their kitchen, and he pleaded no contest to felony spousal battery and was sentenced to 6 months in jail. So with that being said, I personally don't really know too much about their relationship aside from what I watched here on the show. You never overtly see any signs of that happening in the series. I will say I noticed there was some like bruising on Pamela Anderson's shoulders. I forget which shoulder it is, but like I think it appears like halfway into the series, and I don't know if that was supposed to be a subtle hint that there was something going on there. As well as the last scene that Pam and Tommy have together, he is quite literally yelling in her face. So some people may have a problem with the way that their relationship is portrayed on the show, and if you do, I completely understand. Okay, and the fourth thing about this show is that Pamela Anderson did not sign off on this project. Lily James has said in an interview that she tried reaching out to Pamela Anderson but didn't hear back. Sebastian Stan did reach out to Tommy Lee and they were able to talk, but Pamela Anderson had nothing to do with this show. So in that sense, the series can be seen as exploiting a really difficult period of time in Pamela Anderson's life. And it's kind of ironic considering the fact that, like I said earlier, a huge theme is consent, yet the show did not get consent from Pamela Anderson. So okay, now this is like an exciting part for me because I normally am not that person who catches when there's like a mistake or inconsistency, but my diva knowledge came into play. So, like I said, Tower Records is featured throughout the show because the 90s. I forget which episode it is, but there's a moment where you see a Tower Records, and on the outside of Tower Records, there are these albums. So you see like Madonna's Bedtime Stories, Mariah's Daydream, and then the Spice Girls' Spice World album. But the problem is Spice World did not come out until 1997, and this story is supposed to be taking place in 1996, so that album had not come out yet. If they really wanted to put a Spice Girls album on the wall, it should have been Spice, not Spice World. Okay, so my overall grade for this show is a pretty solid B+. Even though the dialogue may be on the nose and the portrayal of Pam and Tommy's relationship a tad bit dubious considering how things ended, Pam and Tommy is an insightful look back at the whirlwind relationship and the first celebrity sex tape scandal that predates the likes of Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian. Though notably, the way in which their respective sex tape scandals affected their careers is different. While Kim K had a reality show, savvy momager, and social media at her disposal, the huge glaring difference between her and Pamela ultimately stems down to control of the narrative and the way that narrative is spun. I think it's unfortunate that Pamela Anderson was not involved because I do feel like this show is a sort of redux and justice for Pamela Anderson in a lot of ways. If you're hesitant to watch the show because of that, that's understandable. But if anything, I think it's definitely worth checking out for Lily James's transformation and performance alone. Alright, well that's about it for this review. If you liked it, please give this video a thumbs up. It would mean so much to me and it would really help push this video out. Comment down below, not just for the algorithm, but comment down below if you're gonna check it out or if you were alive in the 90s and remember this. Like, I'd love to hear your personal opinion and take on this story because I'm sure you have opinions like me. Once again, thank you so much to Hulu for giving me early access to Pam and Tommy. And if you live in the United States and have Hulu, the first 3 episodes are going to be available in a couple of hours, technically February 2nd. So check it out. And yeah, that is pretty much it. As always, everything I said was just my own personal thoughts and all of my humble opinion. Comment down below. Okay, there's a lot of like 90s goodness throughout this show. If you watch it, come back to this video and tell me what was your favorite 90s reference. I mean, aside from the Diva album covers that are outside of the Tower Records, despite the fact that they kind of messed up the Spice Girls timeline, I also really love that moment when they show that Whitney Houston is going to be performing at the VMAs. It's in the newspaper. I love the divas. Check out Diva Dailies. It's my podcast where I talk about divas.